Welcome back to the Convo Couch, ladies and gentlemen. I am Pasta Jardula.
And I'm Fiorella.
And Jonny Sue is still spinning it on the ones and twos. Today we have a great guest with us in the studio. We have a big audience back there. He is running for Congress in Washington's 2nd Congressional District. That's Washington State. Go Wolfpack. No, it's Go Huskies. Sorry. He's launching a Power People campaign running on popular ideas like Medicare for All, a Green New Deal, criminal justice reform, and a guaranteed job with a living wage for everyone. Everybody welcome Jason Call to the couch, everybody.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you very much accommodating me while I'm down here for a few days in L.A., in smoky L.A.
Yeah.
You talk about smoky. When we were driving up to when we met you at a Sarah Smith event in a little small bar where she gave a great speech.
The Black Zia Cantina. I was there.
Yes,
yep.
That's right.
Yep.
You had longer hair there. What happened?
Well, I've been a musician for a long time, and I love my long hair. But I was up at an election return party up in Bellingham in my district, and I kind of got a frosty reception from some liberal people who really should be on my side in terms of policy. And reflecting on it, and what's some advice that people had given me is that the long-haired look is just not going to make it. People aren't going to take you seriously, and I intend to win this race. And I think it was the right thing to do. So, I went and got myself a haircut, and I'm going to look the congressional part. But my opinion was it would be better that I change my hair and win the race rather than conform with policy concessions.
You're going to lose the rock and roll vote.
Yeah.
You're going to lose the
The
rock and
grunge
roll
vote. It's gone.
in Seattle, man. It's gone.
I'm still a rock and roller.
Who's your favorite band of all times, man?
Oh, man.
Come me a
Difficult
couple.
question.
Well,
I hope it's not Dave Matthews.
No, it's
'cause
Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd.
See what I'm talking about?
I'm down with the
Pink
classic
Floyd.
rock.
I
Yeah.
like this guy already.
Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My mom, I grew up in England, and my mom was actually a doubles, you know the game of squash?
Yes.
My mom was a doubles partner with Nick Mason's sister on the amateur circuit where I grew up. Nick Mason is the drummer for Floyd. So I grew up with the Floyd.
There you go. So you want to get this started here because we have a lot of good questions, and we know you got another appointment to go to. Rock and roll Jason Call has now become short hair and ready. I had to do the same thing. We got our first time we got press credentials to the California Democratic Convention. I was like, hey, man, I got to cut my hair. I got to look serious. And after that convention, I was so pissed off, I wish I left it long because they just pissed me off, those Democrats.
Well, it's all for a good cause, right? We win the race, and we're going to get progressive policy into our congressional delegation.
Let's do it. Let's go ahead. Let's get this started.
Okay, so one of the things that often happen is when progressives get in there, either they push the agenda forward, they push the Overton window forward, or they join the establishment. And we've seen a lot of so-called progressives in California join the establishment. How do you plan? Do you plan to join the establishment, or are you going to rage against them, like Rage Against the Machine style?
Okay, I have been raging. I have been raging against the establishment my entire life. But I would like to say that when Bernie ran in 2016, I was part of a movement in Washington State that had a lot of people file for that local grassroots office that we call the PCO, Precinct Committee Officer, which is, then you, using the PCOs, you elect your local party leadership, your legislative districts, your county leadership. And so I had a hand in tripling my local legislative districts PCO membership, brought in a lot of progressives into the party, and ended up getting myself elected to the Washington State Democrats Central Committee, where I represent my legislative district right now. And I am the pushiest progressive voice. The state party chair in Washington absolutely hates me.
That's a good
sign.
That's a good sign. We got the right person in the studio.
But I have brought a lot of progressive resolutions. I was on my county's platform committee in 2018. We brought a housing justice platform piece, and that's now part of the platform. I wrote the resolutions to oppose corporate PAC money from the healthcare industry and the pharmaceutical industry. I wrote the resolution to oppose DCCC blacklisting of vendors. I wrote, or at least my team wrote, a majority of what's on the books now as the gun reform resolution. So I have been pushing for progressive resolutions and progressive values at the state party level in Washington for the last 3 years, and it's just time to take that a step further and make sure that we get that at the congressional level.
Yeah. So why Congress? Because it's important to note to the public, like what you're talking about, the DCCC and all of these local issues are so important because a lot of people don't realize, like, locally you can do so much. So why are you taking this to Congress?
Well, we are represented in the 2nd Congressional District by a very conservative, he's a part of the Third Way Coalition, the New Democrat Coalition. He votes with the Republicans a lot of the time. I've identified a number of votes that he has taken. That the Democratic caucus stood against 60 to 80%, while he voted for, further deregulation of Dodd-Frank rules following the 2008 financial crisis. He's voted in favor of the wealthy on estate tax issues. So while he is, I think it's easy. It's an easy thing for Democrats to be good on what we would consider social issues, LGBTQ and women's rights. But when it comes to the economic issues, that's where we really find a rift in the Democratic Party. And he is definitely on the right wing of that rift. And he needs to be replaced. And I think one of the things that people don't realize about Washington State, we have 10 congressional districts, we have 7 Democrats, and we only have 1 progressive Democrat representing us. Both of our senators are not progressives. If you know Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell, they're both conservative Democrats. But 6 of the 7 House reps are they're New Democrats. They're part of this New Democrat coalition. So I think we are working hard in Washington State on having the congressional representation match what the grassroots is really looking for out of that representation. So, we've got conservative reps, and we need to flip those seats.
We got the same thing in California. A lot of people think, oh, it's a progressive state. There's a lot. No, we're completely trolled by this establishment, like what you're facing in Washington. But what you said to me really kind of really got my attention. Are you big on economic justice as well as social justice?
Absolutely. I think part of my platform, if people read my platform, I'm looking for housing affordability. I'm looking for an avenue to abolish homelessness. I think we need to make massive federal investments in public housing. One of the things that's happening right now, you're probably aware, Amazon just tried to buy the Seattle City Council, and we're extremely happy that Kshama Sawant came through and won her seat with those last-minute ballot counts over the last few days. And so my campaign endorsed Kshama. And well, one of the things that happened with Seattle gentrification is that people are getting priced out. People who have lived in Seattle for generations are getting priced out. They're moving north. My district is north of Seattle, and I live about 40 miles north of Seattle. And what we have seen over the last few years is a real boom in housing in my area, but it's not affordable housing. I mean, they're putting out tracts of what we would consider luxury housing. These are single-family home developments that are going for $400,000, $500,000, and that's all well and good for people who are making money and want to commute 2 hours, because it's a 2-hour drive into Seattle at rush hour from where I live. Right. And so that's all well and good for people who want to do that and can afford to do that. But what it's doing is the home prices are going absolutely crazy in my area, which means rental housing rates are going up. And now people are being priced out of my neighborhoods. And, 20 years ago, my town had about 8,000 people in it. It was a really small town, and we're pushing 70,000 people now. Jeez. And so the population growth that has come north from Seattle is we haven't been able to keep up with it with infrastructure, and we also are not. I mean, we're having increasing homelessness and people being pushed out of our area who have been in our area for generations as well. So there's really a ripple effect to the gentrification that's happening in Seattle. So we're looking for federal rent control. We're looking for investments in public housing and making sure that housing is affordable. Nobody in this country, in the wealthiest nation, should be homeless ever.
Yeah, we have the same issues here in California, and the problem is when it happens locally, there's only so much you can do. It has to be something implemented at either a federal level or something that needs to go and be fixed right away, because right now, there was money allocated here in California and it just hasn't been used properly. In regarding homelessness, though, what are your top 3 main issues that you plan on tackling, like once you get in there, boom, first day?
Okay. Well, I have been if you guys are familiar with the whole Washington movement in Washington State. Whole Washington is a volunteer run organization that is trying to bring single payer to Washington State. And if you guys are aware of how single payer happened in Canada, it started in Saskatchewan and then eventually went national, but they proved that it was a functional system in one of their provinces first before it expanded. We have a really good opportunity to get single payer on the ballot. We have a bill written for Washington State that has been analyzed by Dr. Gerald Friedman, who is the same guy who analyzed Bernie's Medicare for All bill. And so it's a viable bill. What we tried to get it through the state legislature. In the last session, we actually had a Senate sponsor, but it didn't even make it out of committee. And as we kind of dug around as to why that happened, we found out that the chairs of the House and Senate health committees in Washington State both just take bags of money from the health insurance and the pharma industry. It's really one of the things that prompted me to write that resolution at the state level that our elected officials should not be taking money from these industries. So there's a possibility we could get House and Senate sponsorship of that bill in the next session, but we are more likely to get it through as a ballot initiative, which we tried to do in 2018. It failed. We did not get enough signatures. To do ballot initiatives, you really need some funding. So I'd encourage everybody to look up wholewashington.org, and if you feel like you want to help Washington State get single payer on the ballot, because it may happen at the state level before it happens at the federal level, then I would encourage people to help us out there. But, long story short, too late. It's Medicare for All is really my top issue. It's an issue that my opponent, Rick Larson, does not support. Again, he takes bags of money from the healthcare industry. He's over his career. He's taken, I want to say, upwards of $700,000. Out of the $14.5 million that he has raised and spent in 20 years, close, $750,000 of that has come from the healthcare industries. And he's already said definitively that he does not support Medicare for All, and he wants to strengthen the ACA. So he's a lost cause when it comes to Medicare for All issues. One of the reasons I'm running. The other global issue that is huge is the Green New Deal, and I want to make sure that we get some sound environmental policies. I think the Green New Deal is extremely important when we talk about a federal jobs guarantee. It's not the only avenue to federal jobs guarantee, but it is it's a symbiotic issue when we're talking about making sure that people are able to justly transition out of fossil fuel industries, because I think one of the things that we find is that there's this tug of war going on between the environmental movement and the labor movement, and It just does not need to be that way. And the way we can ensure that the environmental movement and the labor movement can work together, because I'm 100% union supporter, I'm going to be seeking union endorsements, is to make sure that when the fossil fuel industries are essentially put out of business, that those people have had their careers, that there is a place for them in the new economy that is, the sustainable green economy. There's no reason that those skills that they are using in their industries couldn't be directly transferable. And I think making sure that there's federal jobs training for that is essential. So those are two issues, and the third one is just getting money out of politics. We've got to overturn Citizens United, and we've got to have campaign finance reform.
Okay. Yeah. All these things happen. You win the election, let's say, you get in there, but now you have a house divided. You have a lot of establishment people still there. How do you plan on bringing systemic change to Congress if you get elected?
Well, I think one of the things to do is follow Bernie's lead. One of the things that is amazingly inspiring to me about the Bernie Sanders movement is that when Bernie talks about how he's going to get things done. And, let's say we have another 4 years of Mitch McConnell, that he intends to go camp out on Mitch McConnell's doorstep with, thousands of local activists saying we are demanding these things from our government. And I'm going to do the same thing. I think when policy is when we have progressive policy that we know needs to get implemented, I think we need to take the resistors, the right-wing Democrats who are in the pockets of the industries that stand to profit from, non-progressive legislation. I think we need to go camp out on their doorsteps, and we need to demand, it really comes down to needing to do exactly what I'm doing right now and saying you're going to be out of office if you don't get behind this. We're going to have a wave of progressive legislators here in 2020, and I think the next step is in 2022 we figure out the people who are still resisting and we flip their seats as well. And I think they've got to know that that's coming. I don't think you get systemic change unless you have those people recognize that their seats are in jeopardy. So you want to keep taking the money, you want to keep resisting progressive policy, fine, that's your prerogative. You're sitting there, but you're not going to be sitting there for that much longer.
Yeah, how do you draw that fine balance? Because yes, we're right that we have to go, and Bernie Sanders talks about not me, us, that it's going to take, once he gets in the White House, it's going to take all of us to literally go and protest and strike and go to the streets. But how do you as a congressperson plan on driving that fine line between working with your constituents and also opposing them, picking your battles? That seems to be the hardest part, because you don't want to necessarily always be fighting, but at the same time, you are fighting like the status quo.
I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I think we're in such dire straits here, economically and environmentally, that I think you have to be always fighting. And my goal is to take the things that are current progressives like Pramila Jayapal, who is the only progressive in Washington State. I just want to make that perfectly clear. We've got a single progressive legislator in Washington State, Pramila Jayapal. But I think you take the things that they have put on the table, that AOC has put on the table, Omar, and I'm there to support them and to keep driving that conversation forward. I think that I don't envision, in terms of our population, we've got increased demand for Medicare for all. We've got increased demand for Green New Deal legislation. I don't think that those things are going to take a backseat to anything. I don't think that we're going to see any backsliding in the population on the demands for those. So the idea is that you get there and you just keep pushing them forwards. I have been a street activist for 30 years. I was out in the streets when I was 19 years old protesting the first Iraq War. That's really what got me into politics. I protested the second Iraq War, of course, and I marched in the streets, essentially begging the Bush administration not to go to war in Iraq. And I am the kind of I will be the kind of congressional representation that is willing to get up on the floor of Congress and really stick it to the establishment, So I know some people like to play that fine line. I'm not really one of those people. I kind of swing for the fences all the time, and I know you whiff sometimes, but you also hit some home runs, and I think that those home runs are needed. Yeah,
but Jayapal herself, when the night we met at a Sarah Smith little get together. But what really pissed me off about Jayapal is that she didn't support Sarah Smith. She supported Adam Smith. So it seems to me that she's also willing to play games too as well. Yeah. Now, you pointed at her as the only progressive, but those were the moves that
You're
always
exactly
had me
right.
looking at her going, wait a second, you're playing with the establishment instead of fighting against them.
I'll be perfectly honest with you, I will be incredibly disappointed if she comes out and endorses anybody other than Bernie Sanders. Absolutely. At this point. I mean, they have worked together on Medicare for all legislation. It wouldn't make sense to me for her to endorse anybody else. But there's also this, is she going to play? I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't expect that I will get her endorsement or that the other progressives running in Washington State will get her endorsement. I think for the same reasons that you have just indicated, that I think she wants to play that very close to the vest in terms of working with the establishment. I mean, it's a sad truth of politics, but I think we're looking at a different way. If you've seen the people who are running for Congress in 2020 here, I'm in communication with some of these candidates all over the country, and we are increasingly bold on our progressive values. I'm willing to say something like billionaires shouldn't exist.
Yes.
And I think 4 years ago, and we have to remember that Pramila was elected in 2016. I'm actually friends with her campaign manager. And I think it was a different time in 2016. I think we have progressed with the need for revolutionary change.
Yeah.
I think we have progressed with that substantially, thanks to Trump. I mean, really, what it comes down to is we've seen what a semi-fascist administration looks like in this country, and I think people are really ready for that kind of political revolution. Bernie is obviously the leader of that, and I've been a Bernie devotee. I used to listen to him when he was on Brunch with Bernie on Tom Hartman's show. So I've known about Bernie for a long time. And I think the wave of progressive challengers that are going to take some of these seats are going to be bold in the way that AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib have been bold. Honestly, they just don't take any crap at all, and they're willing to put it to Republicans, but they're also willing to stick it to the right-wing Democrats as well. And we just need more of that.
We do need more of that, because it's not enough to just have like 5 people in Congress. And there's a sense of urgency, and you're correct about that. So there is a very big issue that's going on right now that several people like AOC, Ilhan Omar, and Bernie Sanders have commented on, and that is the issue of Bolivia. There was what to me seems to be an undeniable coup to oust Evo Morales and push, and he was a leftist socialist president, and now the regime that has taken over has very clear right-wing fascist ties.
Absolutely.
What is your opinion on that situation?
Well, my opinion is that what happened in Bolivia, it was a travesty. It was clearly a right-wing coup. I would say, I don't know about undeniably CIA-backed, but I mean, given the history of the CIA, which, by the way, I think should be abolished.
Thank you. I love you.
Along with ICE.
Yes,
But I would not doubt that there are deep CIA ties to that. And really what we've seen in Bolivia here, what I've read, that it comes on the heels of Morales nationalizing their lithium industry.
Absolutely.
And so my first degree was political science. I got it from the University of Washington back in 1994, political science degree. And a lot of my study was just sort of the intrigue that the CIA has backed over the last, since they overthrew Mossadegh in Iran, because he nationalized the Iranian oil industry. So the very first thing that I thought of was what happened in Chile in '73 when Pinochet ousted Allende, and I said, here we go again, and that was a CIA-backed coup. And there
on 9/11,
there have been so many CIA-backed coups around the world. It's quite frankly, it's disgusting. It's undemocratic. Our taxpayers, our tax dollars go to fund the CIA, and so essentially as Americans we're paying to overthrow democratic institutions in other countries. And now, as you said, the people who have assumed power are clearly right-wing ideologues, and I just read today that the new president, I don't remember her name, but she happens to be the aunt of somebody who was busted for the cocaine trade in Bolivia. So I want to say that I'm surprised. I'm very sad for the Morales family and the Morales administration. He over the last how long has he been in there? Since 2006, I want to say
14 years.
14 years. He's done great things for the country of Bolivia, and what really it came down to, he was taking away the profitability of this resource industry from the war profiteers and et cetera, and it was too much to allow him to continue his presidency. And so you really see what kind of pressure governments are around from U.S.-backed multinational corporations all over the globe.
Yeah.
But that's got to stop. It's
And just as a follow-up, like there are audio tapes including kind of just mentioning Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and the U.S. There's really not an anti-war movement in this country right now because people are obviously so distracted by their own economic issues. But like, what do we as a people do to kind of bring awareness to that? And what would you do as a congressperson to bring awareness to our kind of imperialism that we're still, using to overthrow governments and to pretty much funnel money into the military industrial complex and still take that away from us here at home?
Well, it really goes back to informing the general population. I think we have a politically uninspired population in the United States. That's why we see such low voter turnout. And part of the reason is I think a lot of people just don't feel whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you're not really working for them, which for the most part is the case.
Yeah.
And so I really think it is incumbent upon the progressives who are running to flip seats, and whether they're running against Republicans or they're running to flip out right-wing Democrats. I think it is really incumbent upon us to stick together and to do whatever we can to inform the American public. I think one of the great things that Franklin Delano Roosevelt did during his presidency is he had those fireside chats, and he really talked to the American people. And I think we have lost politicians communicating effectively with the general public. They really all they do is they ramp up for these election cycles. They put out a lot of propaganda, a lot of corporate backed propaganda, so that they can get themselves elected, and then they go off to DC and they really don't communicate effectively with their home base. I do not want to be that kind of politician. I want to make sure I'm coming back home in those off seasons and I'm holding those town halls and I'm telling people what's really going on. And I think people will react positively to that honesty. I'm not going to paint any kind of picture that our government is, what Reagan used to call the shining beacon on the hill. I think people need to know that is not what our country is right now. We are not doing right by our people, but we're also not doing right by the globe, people around the world. And so I intend to be a truth teller to my constituents. If I find something that I think my voters need to hear about that is not a good thing that our government is doing, I think that they need to know about that. I don't think you get people to rise up and have those protests unless you have people who are in the mix in Congress willing to go back and to their home districts and tell people the truth.
Well, building upon that, we're talking about this conflict in Bolivia. I consider myself to be a progressive, and the issues that are most important to me are ending the wars, election integrity, and my civil liberties being abused by Google, whatnot, and everything that's going on. That's not on your front page. How do you intend to reach out to people like myself and get those votes within your district for people who have those issues? Not to say that your issues aren't important,
right,
but these issues to me are my issues over here. And it seems to be like when you see a lot of certain progressives, they are either kind of going this way with Medicare for all, Green New Deal, jobs guarantee, where some of us are more like foreign policy, inclined and everything. How do you plan to get those votes?
Well, I will tell you that I have been, like I said, an anti-war activist for 30 years. That was actually where I got my involvement in politics. I am strongly anti-war. I support, it's not a popular thing to say in a district where the military plays heavily. In the Puget Sound region in Washington, we've got naval bases in Everett. We've got naval bases on Whidbey Island. Yeah. One of the things that the incumbent there, Rick Larson, does is he takes a lot of money from defense contractors, a lot of money from Boeing, which is a big military contractor, and he's really working for them. But I think the reality is, we've got 800 bases worldwide, and we've got to close bases worldwide. I think maybe strategically there would be some reason to keep a few of them open, but our founding fathers essentially said that standing armies are mischief. And and so if you've got a large army, I mean, the military shouldn't be a jobs program. I mean, that's you know, I support
that's important.
I support national defense. I think every country has a right to national defense, but we do not have just national defense. We have global imperialism.
Exactly.
We have our armies engaging in foreign countries for the purpose of protecting multinational corporations. So I'm well aware of all of that. You can't make everything your top issue, but that is definitely close to the top of my issues. And one of the interesting things about progressive issues is that they are all in some way intertwined. I don't think you can there's no progressive issue that is an island. I think they're all linked in one way or another. So I would say that the reduction of the military budget goes hand in hand with the goals of the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
So I think that people that we who are going to lose their jobs in the military, there are places for them in the new sustainable economy. But I think our military budget is insanely bloated and wasteful. And, you know, we've got issues in our region right now with the military. We've got on Whidbey Island, we've got these growler jets that are flying morning, noon, and night, and they're deafening sounds. They're flying at 120 decibels, and they're flying over residential areas. And 120 decibels, that's hearing loss. A prolonged exposure to that is that's hearing loss. One of the chairs of the local Democratic Party's friend of mine is one of the people who encouraged me to run. He took a recording of these jets taking a pass. He lives 2 miles from the runway, and it was 89 decibels inside his house. And these things are flying every 15 minutes. Well, the local communities have been up in arms, and Rick Larson, taking the money that he does from the military-industrial complex, the war profiteers, and the transportation industry, Boeing, he's completely ignored those calls. So I have a goal of not just reducing the flights of those growlers. I would like to see them eliminated from the area. I don't know how politically feasible it is to say, I'm going to try and eliminate. Well, I can try, right? But I don't know how feasible it is to say we will get them eliminated, but we have to get them reduced. They're incredibly environmentally destructive, not just the sound, but just the general pollution in the area. And they are destroying people's quality of lives. People who live on those islands, they're idyllic, island locations, beautiful ocean views, and you're just, your quality of life is just destroyed by these jets taking passes over the Puget Sound, and they don't need to do that. That's the thing, is it's completely wasteful. They're doing it because they've been given the budget to do it.
Exactly.
And spend that money. They're war toys. They're people playing games. So people could argue that they have strategic value, but the reality is that they don't. This is just an excuse for the war profiteers to get more taxpayer money. Again, you've got the military tied into the environmental movement there. I think that's important. Now, you mentioned election integrity. I support hand-marked paper ballots. I don't know if any other candidates have talked about that specifically, but after George Bush was able to steal the election in 2004 in Ohio because the Republicans had the Secretary of State there, Kenneth Blackwell, really rigged the game in Ohio for Bush to get reelected. I really believe that I've done a lot of research on the electronic voting machines. I know people can say, well, you can have open source and you can look at the code, but I know that if you are the code writer, you can bury code flipping inside there and nobody would ever know. And so I don't know if you know who Brad Friedman is, but I have been following his work on election integrity since 2004, and so I'm well aware of election integrity issues, and I think it's really important that we pay more close attention to our elections, and I would support the elimination of electronic voting machines because there's strong evidence that they have been used to flip election seats. In multiple elections over the last 15, 20 years. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree 100% with that, but the fact that he said open source and you know what's going on, that's a big plus because people don't even know about the situation when it comes to open source, closed source. And I think a lot of people have a little bit of inaccuracies when it comes to like the hand marking. In other words, in Florida, they were able to eliminate those by the hand marking ones. So, I mean, I know
the hanging chads.
The hanging chads. Yeah. So I know there's this whole dispute about it, whatnot. I'm glad the fact that you know the words open source
Right, okay.
and talk about that. So at least we can have a discussion about that. Can I do some quick super chats real quick, and then we'll get to the next question?
Sure.
All right, so we have Tony watches closely. He says, I just want to hear you say it so I can see Fee's expression. Thank you for the super chat contribution, Tony watches closely, as it is always appreciated on the couch.
He always says that dumb little jingle, and it irritates me. So.
We have a little friend of yours from a super chat contribution, Oz, from the land of Oz. Oz with faith. We love you, Oz. Jason called to defeat corporate-owned tool Larson. Larson is a corrupt corporate shill. Shame, shame. We love you, the land of Oz. We love all the Bernie crats up there in Washington. Laura Fielding, Courtney Love, all you peeps. Brian Cheeseman. I know these are all your people.
Yep.
They made such an impact when we went up there to see you guys. And thank you so much for coming and doing this with us today. Fee, you got the next question.
Yeah, so I just want to say I agree with you as far as paper ballots go, because we're doing open source. Well, we're doing the what is it, the electronic machines, and they tell us they're open source, but they Pastas try to get in contact with them to verify that they are, and they completely ignored him, and that is a very specific way of rigging something. And going along with that, 2016, we saw a lot of our ballots not counted here in California and across the country, but simultaneously there was this theory on Russiagate that was being pushed. What is your take on the whole Russiagate, and how influential do you think it was in the election of Donald Trump?
I don't think it was hugely influential. You know, I think the thing that won the election for Donald Trump is that Hillary was a terrible candidate, and she just did not appeal to people. And quite frankly, I will say I don't have a lot of Republican friends, but the people who I do know who are Republicans said that they would have voted for Bernie, but they were never going to vote for Hillary. Now, some people have said, well, that's misogynistic, and people have a right to their opinions of why they're going to vote this way or that way. But I know just from that anecdotal evidence that I know a substantial number of people who would have voted for Bernie again, but were just never going to vote for Hillary. So I think she did a terrible job campaigning in those key states of Ohio and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan, and she there was an assumption on the part of her team that she had those states locked up, and she didn't go campaigning there. She didn't have a message that appealed to them. And as fraudulent as he has been with it in retrospect, Trump went out there with a populist message, and these people are hurting economically. So the fact that he was able to win those key states that were are heavy manufacturing bases where people are working hard hours, long hours, and not making as much money and not getting the benefits that they need to, it is not surprising that he was able to con them in that way. Quite frankly, I doubt that Hillary Clinton administration would have done much for those people. Mm-hmm. What they are looking for is a real progressive movement, and I think Bernie's going to wrap up those states. So nice. As far as the Russiagate thing goes, I would just say no. I think that there was minimal impact, well, I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, it just got
Sanders flexing with the Jesus and the rainbows. That might have swayed your vote. Had you seen that meme?
I did not.
The rainbow Bernie Sanders. Come on, that made me.
I did not see that meme.
I said no Hillary after that one. That was it. Well, let me ask you a question right now, because we're talking about this. Where do you stand on impeachment today? Because I'm personally against it, and I know some people are for it. It's not that I don't want to take down a corrupt president, but in regards to Ukraine-gate, where do you stand on impeachment?
Well, I think there are many things that Trump could and should be impeached for. I support impeachment. I think that it's the morally right thing to do. I don't know that the Democratic Party has the moral the moral compass to do that impeachment, because there's so much hypocrisy there.
Yes.
But Trump is he's a bad dude. I think we're so close to the election. I don't know how much good it's going to do. I don't think anybody reasonably thinks that the Senate is going to actually remove him from office. And so maybe it's a lot of wasted effort, but I'm hoping that just sort of a national exposure of Trump's corruption will wake people up. I think for that purpose alone, just to say, hey, look at the guy you installed in office. But the flip side of that is that, and this is something that I have tried to do in my role on the Washington State Democrats, in challenging the centrism and the right wing ideology from the Democratic perspective, is to say, hey, you know what, you can't be. It's like when people started talking about Russia interfering in our elections, my first thought was, well, the United States has interfered in elections for decades.
Yeah.
So where do you guys get off? And a lot of people will say, well, still, we can't have people interfering in our elections. And I say, can we be a little bit introspective about this? So for the Democrats to go after Trump for some things that you could turn around and flip right back on the Democratic Party, there's some hypocrisy there, and yet I still think it needs to be done. I think at some point we've got to step up and hold this president accountable.
I mean, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I don't agree necessarily, but I like your answer, because you do point out the fact there's a form of hypocrisy, especially what happened in the Ukraine. I mean, we have Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff leading up this impeachment when they were so guilty and being carpetbaggers and grabbing money in the Ukraine itself in a regime change war.
Yeah.
So, I mean.
I don't think anybody who is being honest with themselves could say that Hunter Biden having that position in the Ukraine was was legit or ethical. I mean, I think so. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things where Democrats are not willing to be introspective and hold themselves accountable for. And then, as you know, as progressives, when you start to criticize the establishment wing of the Democratic Party, they come back at you with, well, what do you want us to lose to Trump?
Right.
Why are you being so divisive? You're a Trump apologist, which is absolutely disingenuous. I believe that we have the capacity for good government, but we're not going to get there unless we get money out of politics, and that goes for the Republicans and the Democrats.
Absolutely.
Somebody, my dad, who is a Reagan Republican and more of a libertarian type, and he lives in Florida, he calls me out on, being involved with the Democratic Party. And I say, listen, if the Republicans are 100% evil, the Democrats are 97% evil. So I'm sticking with the 3% of the Democratic Party that I think is not evil, and I'm trying to expand that base.
So just to kind of finish up, because I know we got to get going, who are your top 3 candidates for president? I mean, if you had to choose 3 or more, someone other than Bernie Sanders, who would they be?
Someone other than Bernie Sanders. It's
a difficult question.
It is a difficult question. Because I don't, really there's nobody, and I'll be perfectly honest. I know you guys like Tulsi. I was a big Tulsi fan in 2016. I tend to think of her as more of a distraction these days. I think that there's some unnecessary division on the left in regards to Tulsi. I've got a photograph of me, I've got me and her together. I thought she was fabulous. I think she really stuck her neck out in 2016. And I was very appreciative of her for that. I really wish that she wasn't running against Bernie Sanders right now. But as I honestly, just hands down, I don't know what I'm going to do if it's not Bernie Sanders. I really don't know what it's going to what I'm going to do. I don't look at Elizabeth Warren as a real progressive. I think she may be the least bad of a bad lot. And I also don't want to say I wouldn't vote for her, because I think really we've got to get Trump out of here. Yeah. But she would be somebody that I would hold my nose and vote for if she ended up being, but yeah, I mean, it's,
I wouldn't,
see, the thing is, we're in a tough spot. We are really in a tough spot, because honestly, I don't think any other candidate but Bernie can beat Trump. That's just my honest feelings. Yeah, so if it's not Bernie, I don't know what to do.
Your dad, he won't vote for Bernie Sanders.
No, he would.
He would.
He was one of the guys.
Your dad's friends, the Libertarians, a lot of them won't vote for Bernie Sanders, but they will vote for Tulsi Gabbard. And the only reason why I'm bringing this up, because I think it's essential to say that she's not running it against Bernie Sanders. Okay. And to me, the acceptance from some Bernie fans who have not let her in is kind of just, that's the distraction itself. We have to think outside of our echo. We have to get independents and people to bring them in to make this party bigger to defeat Trump. So that's why it's important for me, not just because of the issues, but for that reason whatsoever. I don't see her as running against Bernie Sanders. I see her running aside and a possible combination down the road.
I hope that there will be, and this is why I try to say very little about Tulsi, because I don't want people who are hardcore Tulsi supporters to hate me because I'm not like fully behind Tulsi. But you know, there's more in common. There's way more in common than there are differences.
Right.
So I you know, if she ended up being the nominee, which I have to say is not going to happen, but if she ended up being the nominee, you know, I would vote for her. If Elizabeth Warren ended up being the nominee, you know, I would vote for her. I don't know that I could vote for
Andrew Yang.
You know,
I knew you were
and this is all you know, really just speculation because I think anybody who is paying attention and being realistic about things knows that it's down to two candidates. You know, that's my opinion. That's my assessment. Is it's down to Bernie and Warren.
Yeah.
And you know, I look at who is. I mean, Bernie is far better positioned to beat Trump. I have seen enough of Elizabeth Warren to know that she will run to the center. You know, I mean, she already is. Clearly she already is going to run to the center. So I don't want her to be the nominee. But I also couldn't say that I wouldn't vote for her because unfortunately Trump is so destructive. And what I really think about is the communities. I mean, you can sit on your high horse and say, you know, I'm going to take this huge moral stand and I'm not going to vote for a centrist, but there are so many people who are impacted by his policies, what's going on at the border, the fact that, you know, he's got, you know, these right-wing Christians running Health and Human Services, and those are the sort of on-the-ground issues that have real impacts on people's lives that I couldn't say that I would vote in any way that helped him get another term. Right. So I just got to be honest about that. So it's tough because the truth is, I think if it's anybody but Bernie, I think we're screwed.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I don't think Warren has a chance in hell to beat Donald Trump. I think he would wipe the floor with her. I think even if people voted for her, she just wouldn't inspire anybody.
She's not an inspiring candidate.
Exactly. So I'm with you there on that. That I don't believe Warren is but I'm with Post on the fact that I think the independents and those people will vote for Tulsi, and we've seen that statistically. I think if she gets enough delegates, I think she is actually more of an ally rather than. I don't consider Warren an ally. I consider her Bernie's biggest threat, and he has to beat her.
I agree.
I agree with you. Like I believe if Bernie doesn't, like Bernie seems like the more likely to win guy, and if he doesn't win, I just feel like it's going to be very difficult, and I think it's going to require us to make sure that he wins or that we get a progressive in, because otherwise we can't really afford it, so to speak. This is the biggest election of our time.
I believe so. I think 2020 is a make or break election for the future.
Yeah, and I everything you said today, everything right here really resonated with us. I think you were a great candidate. I'm definitely going to support you.
Thank you.
I wish you were a little bit more of a, because I honestly believe that if it's Bernie Warren, he doesn't win. I believe if it's Bernie Tulsi, he has a shot, because that's just my personal opinion.
Are you talking about her being his vice president,
or just any type of alignment?
Honestly,
Secretary of State.
I really hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
I'm really hoping that if Bernie gets the nomination, that he's going to pick either Nina Turner or Rashida Tlaib. I think Rashida.
And
Tlaib
I would like Tulsi as a Secretary of State. That's where I would see her.
I appreciate Tulsi on foreign policy issues, and I think one of the things that I've said recently is, while I am not a personal supporter of like Go Tulsi, I also think her voice belongs in the conversation, and I think that I do not want to see the Bernie Tulsi thing being a point of division rather than a point of mutual support.
Yeah, I even say I'm Tulsi first, but if Bernie wins, I'm in the streets for Bernie. Bernie started this whole thing, and 75% of the Tulsi-crats are ex-burners anyways. So that division that I see going on, and I see it within the progressive movement, it's scary sometimes. Yeah. But you don't have to worry about holding your nose and voting for Elizabeth Warren, because let me tell you something. she doesn't have a shot anyways. She's got zero shot.
Yeah,
as soon as she said she's not going to go on Fox and talk to little people, I think it was the last dagger.
Right.
And that's something I see a person and a candidate like you do. Everything you said today has been great. I think you're an awesome candidate.
Thank you.
You really helped out the CONVO couch wipe out the stench from the last candidate we had on, and we came strong. So I hope some of our followers who gave us strikes said, you better get a good candidate on. I think you're amazing, and I think you should just tell people where they can go to help and find out where they can help out Jason Call.
All right. So my website is callforcongress.com, and that's FOR, not the number 4, callforcongress.com. You can volunteer. You can sign up to volunteer, sign up to donate. As you know, grassroots fundraising is not easy. And so if you want to support my campaign, I would ask for a monthly contribution. One of the ways that grassroots campaigns are able to continue functioning is recurring contributions. So if you can make $5 a month, $10 a month contribution to my campaign, what I'm looking for is, my opponent takes $1 million every cycle. 75% of it is from corporate PACs, and they are the industries that are destroying our planet and destroying our economy. They are the source of almost all of our woes. He was asked at a fundraising event a couple of weeks ago, "Are you going to stop taking corporate PAC money?" And he said no. So he's in deep with these industries, and I don't need to raise and spend $1 million, but what I do need is 10,000 people who are willing to give me $5 a month. And if I can get $50,000 a month to run this race, we are going to beat him. I guarantee that if I am on the ballot next to him, because Washington is a top 2 primary, so if it's me and Rick Larson on the ballot next to each other, I am going to win that race. So I want you guys to have confidence in me as a progressive candidate, be inspired enough to kick in $5 or $10 every month to support my campaign. I'm on Twitter at Call for Congress. I'm on Facebook at Call for Congress, and I'm so thankful that we have so many good progressive candidates running all over the country. But I do want to say this about my race. My opponent is a soft target. Some people are running against Democratic leadership, like Shahid Buttar is running against Nancy Pelosi. We've got people running against, we got Michaela Wilkes in Maryland running against Steny Hoyer. We've got Jen Perelman in Florida running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Yeah.
And those are some tough races, and I encourage you to support those candidates. But I'll tell you right now, this is going to be an easy flip. If I can get fundraising on this is not one of those, he's never going to win those races. I guarantee I can beat Rick Larson in the general if I'm on the primary ballot next to him. And the Washington primary is August 4th. So we are we're hoping for some fundraising.
A little bit late. You got some time.
We got some time. That's, don't sit on your laurels or anything. start kicking into my campaign right now. But this is a very winnable seat to take a congressional seat out of the hands of a corporate Democrat and put it in the hands of a true progressive. And I've got progressive credentials. I've got 30 years of street activism behind me, and I have been fighting at the state party level with the Washington State Democrats. The establishment there, they hate me. But you look at the last 5 resolutions in the books on terms of party affairs. I wrote 3 of them. That's one of the reasons they hate me, because I'm trying to change the way the party operates. Yeah. I want the Democrats to be an honest party. We've got a long way to go.
Well, the reason why they hate you is the reason why we love you. And your friends over here, Oz with another super chat contribution says, Jason call for integrity. He liked it so much he said it twice. Yeah. Jason call for integrity. Will California Congress please donate today? The land of Oz, Washington State loves LUVS, the CONVO couch. We love Washington State, and I want to thank you for coming on in. You're pretty awesome, and if chance you come back again and do it with us again.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yes, definitely.
For Pasta Jardula
and Fiorella,
Jonny Sue with Jason Call in the house.
CONVO out. Bye, guys. Thanks
you,
for
everybody.
watching.
Thank you so much.
Donate.
Go donate.